The summer I turned 22, the house felt smaller than ever. My father's remarriage 2 years earlier had stitched two families together with polite smiles and thin threads of patience. Among the new faces was Ryan, my stepbrother, quiet, thoughtful, and unfailingly composed. We shared the same hallway but little else. Most mornings began with the sound of his footsteps, light and measured, crossing to the kitchen before dawn. I would often hear him humming softly, a habit that filled the empty corridors with calm. I never admitted it, but that sound had become part of my routine, like the ticking of a familiar clock that I had always imagined that a stepbrother would be loud, intrusive, maybe even careless with privacy. Ryan was none of those things. He carried an air of restraint that both comforted and unsettled me. When he spoke, his words were chosen with care, as though he measured each one before letting it go. One late evening, rain began to fall, softly at first, then harder, until the street outside disappeared behind a curtain of water. I was in my room, trying to finish a design project for university, when the electricity flickered and went out. My laptop screen died mid-sentence. In the sudden dark, the only light came from Ryan's room across the hallway, glowing through the gap under his door. For reasons I couldn't quite explain, I stepped out and knocked. "Ryan, do you have a flashlight?" I asked, voice half lost in the storm. That he opened the door almost immediately. "I think so," he said, moving aside to let me in. His room was tidy, spare, books arranged by color, sketches pinned neatly to the wall. The faint scent of rain-damp paper lingered in the air. He found a flashlight, handed it to me, and smiled. "You can borrow it. I'll fix the fuse box after the rain slows." Something in his calmness kept me there. "Actually," I began, "maybe you could look at my lamp instead. It keeps short-circuiting." He followed me back to my room without hesitation. When he bent to check the plug, the light from his flashlight cut across his face, carving sharp shadows beneath his eyes. He worked silently, sleeves rolled up, focused entirely on the task. I watched the way concentration softened his expression, how patience seemed to live in the small movements of his hands. "There," he said after a moment. The lamp blinked to life. It was just a loose wire. I thanked him, expecting him to leave. But he lingered, glancing at the scattered drawings on my desk. "You've improved," he said quietly, pointing to one. "The lines feel more confident now." I hadn't realized he'd been noticing my work. The comment, simple as it was, struck deeper than I expected. "You've seen them before?" He nodded. "You always leave the door half open. Hard not to notice." We talked then, about sketches, university, the small differences between how we each saw the world. His voice carried an easy warmth, and the storm outside became a muted rhythm against the windows. For the first time, the distance between us felt less like a wall and more like a bridge waiting to be crossed. As the night deepened, our conversation drifted toward quieter subjects, what it meant to live in a blended family, the awkwardness of belonging halfway in and halfway out. Ryan admitted he still felt like a guest sometimes. I confessed that I did too, even in my own home. He laughed softly, not mocking but understanding. "Maybe that's what makes us similar," he said. When the power returned, the sudden brightness startled us both. I realized how close we were standing, close enough to hear the quick intake of his breath. Neither of us moved for a long second. The air felt charged, uncertain, filled with something neither of us had named. Finally, Ryan took a step back, his usual composure returning. "I should get some sleep," he murmured. "Yeah," I said, though my voice came out quieter than intended. He left the room, and the echo of his footsteps faded down the hallway. The lamp he had fixed cast a soft circle of light across the floor, but the room felt strangely different now, as if something invisible had shifted. I sat at my desk again, staring at the lines of my unfinished drawing, but my thoughts were far away. I had called him in for help, nothing more, yet when he left, the silence he left behind carried a weight I couldn't explain. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, and in that quiet, I understood that something had begun, something fragile, unspoken, and entirely new. In the days that followed, the rhythm of the house changed in ways too subtle to explain. Ryan and I still crossed paths in the kitchen, still exchanged polite nods over breakfast, but something invisible lingered between us, an awareness, soft and persistent, that neither of us could name. That I found myself noticing things I hadn't before, the way he rolled his sleeves before washing dishes, the quiet hum in his throat when he worked on his architecture models, the calm precision with which he seemed to arrange his entire world. It should have been ordinary. It wasn't. One afternoon, while our parents were out of town for the weekend, the house settled into its rare silence. I spent the morning sketching, but my focus was fractured. Every line I drew curved toward distraction. When I finally stepped outside for air, I found Ryan sitting on the porch, reading. He looked up as I approached, sunlight spilling across the edge of his face. "You've been avoiding me," he said simply, the word struck like an unexpected chord. I tried to deflect. "I've just been busy." He closed the book and rested it on his lap. "That's not true. You barely look at me anymore." There was no accusation in his voice, only quiet concern. Still, my pulse quickened. "It's not like that," I said. "I just needed space." "From what?" he asked, standing now, the softness in his tone carrying something deeper, hurt, maybe, or curiosity that I didn't have an answer. The silence between us swelled until even the distant hum of traffic seemed to fade. He studied me for a moment, then spoke again. "That night, when the lights went out, did I say or do something wrong?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I said quickly. "You didn't." "Then what changed?" His persistence cornered me in honesty. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe nothing changed. Maybe I did." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flicker of confusion behind his calm exterior. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly. "But don't pretend I haven't noticed something. You look at me differently now." The truth of his words left me unguarded. "I'm trying not to," I said before I could stop myself. His expression softened. "Why?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing coherent came out, only a shaky breath and the sudden awareness that we were standing too close again. The air felt charged, the same tension that had filled my room that night. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, then Ryan looked away, as if searching for steadier ground. "You know," he said, voice low, "sometimes I think we build walls around ourselves just to test if someone will try to climb them." I managed a faint smile. "And if they do? Then maybe they care enough to see what's on the other side." He turned toward the garden, where the sunlight trembled through the leaves, and something in the moment shifted. It wasn't a confession, not exactly, but it was close enough to leave the air trembling. That evening, we ate dinner separately. The silence that followed felt heavier than words could fill. I sat in my room afterward, replaying the conversation over and over, haunted by the calm in his eyes when he'd said maybe they care. Before bed, a soft knock sounded at my door. I hesitated before opening it. Ryan stood there, hesitant but composed. "I just wanted to say," he began, "whatever this is between us, it doesn't have to be strange. I value you, Ayan. I don't want distance to ruin that." His sincerity disarmed me. "I don't either," I said quietly. He nodded, offering a small smile, the kind that hides more than it reveals. "Good night, then." When he left, I sat on the edge of my bed, my mind restless. His words were gentle, but beneath them, something unresolved pulsed. It wasn't love, not exactly, it was something more complex, affection tangled with confusion, admiration shadowed by guilt. That I thought of how easily life folds into expectations, brother, son, friend, and how rarely it leaves space for feelings that fall between definitions. Outside, the wind had quieted. The night stretched wide and silent, as if holding its breath for whatever might come next. I didn't know what that would be. Only that something inside me had shifted again, deeper this time, toward a truth I was not yet ready to face. The following weeks unfolded quietly, as though the house itself had decided to hold its breath. Whatever unspoken understanding had lingered between Ryan and me seemed to dissolve into routine, 2 polite conversations, shared meals, and the steady rhythm of ordinary life. Yet beneath that calm, something fragile had changed. Ryan began spending more time outside, at the library, at the gym, with friends I barely knew. When he was home, he kept to his room, door half closed, music playing softly behind it. I told myself I didn't mind, but the silence felt like absence. One evening, I came home to find the living room half packed with boxes. Ryan was labeling one of them in his neat handwriting. "You're leaving?" I asked, though the answer was already there in front of me. He looked up, his tone even. "Just for a while. I got accepted into the university exchange program. It's only a few months." The words landed gently but carried the weight of distance. I nodded, pretending to smile. "That's great news." He returned the smile, brief and careful. "Yeah. It feels like the right time." We stood in silence, the space between us filled with everything neither of us said. I wanted to tell him that the house would feel emptier without him, that his quiet presence had become something I depended on. But I didn't. The moment was too fragile for honesty. Later that night, I found myself sitting at my desk, staring at my unfinished sketches. I had drawn the same pattern of intersecting lines for days without meaning to, lines that crossed, drifted apart, and never quite met again. I realized they mirrored us. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Ryan stepped in, leaning against the doorframe. "You're still awake," he said. "I couldn't sleep." He nodded, then looked around the room. "You've been drawing more lately." "It helps," I said. "It keeps my thoughts in order." "Good," he murmured. "Keep doing that." He hesitated before adding, "You have a gift, Ayan. Don't waste it on things that can't be fixed." I didn't answer at first. "Is that what we are, something that can't be fixed?" He looked away, the faintest trace of sadness softening his expression. "No. Just something that can't be named." The honesty in his words left a quiet ache between us. He crossed the room, placed his hand briefly on my shoulder, then let it fall. "Take care of yourself," he said. When he left, the air in the room seemed to grow still again, heavy with unspoken meaning. I sat there long after the sound of his footsteps faded, feeling the strange pull of loss before the goodbye had even happened. The next morning, the car was waiting outside. My father helped load Ryan's bags while my stepmother fussed over last-minute details. I stood by the gate, pretending to scroll through my phone. Ryan caught my eye just before getting in. "Write to me," he said. That I nodded. "I will." But when the car turned the corner and disappeared, I realized I hadn't asked where exactly he was going, or when he'd be back. Days turned into weeks. The house regained its usual rhythm, yet everything felt slightly offbeat. I kept busy with my final design project, but every sketch carried a hint of something familiar, a color he once liked, a line shaped by memory. Sometimes I would catch myself listening for his quiet humming in the morning, only to be met by silence. One night, unable to sleep, I wrote a letter I never meant to send. In it, I told him about the lamp he had fixed that still worked perfectly, about how the rain hadn't fallen like that since, about how I had learned that some feelings aren't meant to be acted upon, they're meant to be understood. That I ended it with a single line: "You taught me that care can exist without claim, and love can live quietly, asking for nothing." When I finished writing, I folded the page and tucked it inside my sketchbook. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was enough. A few months later, a postcard arrived, no return address, just a photograph of a quiet street lined with autumn leaves and a short note in Ryan's handwriting: "I hope you're still drawing." I smiled. Somehow, I knew that was all that needed to be said. That evening, I turned on the lamp he had fixed, its soft light spilling across my desk. For the first time in months, the house felt calm again, not because something had ended, but because I had learned to carry what remained with peace. And though his footsteps no longer echoed down the hallway, a part of him still lingered, in every sketch, every quiet night, every unspoken boundary that had taught me what it meant to truly understand someone.